Welcome and thank you for joining me. This webinar is intended for OSEP-funded 325K grantees who are preparing to complete and submit an annual performance report. So let's get started. The annual performance report, or APR for short, is used by OSEP to monitor grant performance and the progress of grantees toward meeting the goals and objectives of each grant awarded by the department. As you may recall, grantees are asked to report on their performance annually, and that report, the annual performance report, is used by OSEP on behalf of the department to evaluate grant performance. Recommendations for continuation funding will be made based on the results of the evaluation. As a result, you may sometimes hear the APR referred to as a continuation report, and it's important that you know the purpose of the report is determination of continued funding. We use standard form Ed 524B for this purpose, as do all of the offices in the Department of Education. As we review APRs, we're interested in knowing first if you're making substantial progress in terms of your performance, and secondly, if you are managing the federal funds responsibly as you complete the work of your grant. OSEP has standardized the time frame used for annual performance reports so that each year you should expect to receive a reminder and general instructions about the APR in late January, early February, and reports will be due in early May. You will use the same form for reporting each year, and in fact, you will use the same form for final performance reports at the end of your grant. And as I mentioned, you can expect the same general timeline annually. OSEP will review the APRs and use the information provided as a basis for deciding on continuation funding. So the deadline for report submission is early May. We use May and June to review the reports, clarify information if needed, and hope to let you know of our decisions by mid-summer, but no later than September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year for the federal government. I want to emphasize the importance of your report, that you are careful, accurate, and on time. Please use the APR to demonstrate progress from year to year and report on the outcomes of your work that result from the use of federal funds. So what will we cover during this webinar? We'd like to provide you an overview to talk first about project objectives, to recognize that strong project objectives are helpful in developing and reporting on high-quality performance measures. So secondly, we'll talk about performance measures. We want to assist you in developing relevant, measurable, outcome-oriented performance measures that you will be able to use to report on your grant. With strong performance measures, you're more likely to have meaningful data to report and will be better equipped to demonstrate the success of your performance. And then finally, we wanted to make you aware of the Ed 524B form that's used for reporting. I've already begun to mention why this is important. Having high-quality objectives and measures makes it easier for you to measure your progress and allows you to report your progress easily using quantifiable data. It allows you to establish both short-term or annual targets and long-term targets for your performance. And it allows OSEP staff to then better understand your work, evaluate your performance relative to the targets that you established, and provide evidence of program effectiveness. We will be using your annual performance report to evaluate your performance and see that you're making progress to help you in making progress toward achieving the objectives and goals of your grant. But we also aggregate the data and look across grantees, use data we gather evidence of program effectiveness for the entire 325K program. Those results are reported to the Secretary and to Congress as our justification for continued funding of the entire program. So very important work that we have ahead of us. Let's look at the relationship between goals, objectives, and performance measures. This figure shows the relationship clearly. We begin with program goals. So ask yourself, what was the intended outcome of OSEP's personnel development program? It was outlined in the priority, and your application would have spoken to it. As a reminder, the goals of OSEP's personnel development program for the 325K program is to help address state-identified needs for highly qualified, effective personnel who can work with infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. The second goal is to ensure that those personnel have the necessary knowledge and skills derived from science or evidence-based practices to work successfully in serving those children. In short, the PDP program is intended to increase the number and improve the quality of personnel available to serve infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. Related to those goals, you identified project objectives. So you told us how you would go about helping us accomplish the program goals. You outlined in your application what your project would be doing to support the overall personnel development program goals. And then finally, we specified some program performance measures, and I'll talk more about those in a minute. And you specified project-specific measures that you will use to evaluate your performance. So performance measures, we'll talk about how you plan to measure your progress toward meeting your objectives. Let's start with project objectives. The question is, what are you trying to accomplish? Good objectives will help facilitate your activities, the program's implementation, and your progress toward accomplishing those intended outcomes. And we try to standardize project objectives by first stating, begin the objective by stating a verb and then define the desired outcome or condition. I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. But we find it a helpful format is when you're writing your objectives to begin with the verb and then define the desired outcome or condition that you're hoping to accomplish. Other formats are allowed, but as I mentioned, this has been one that tends to work well for us and works well for grantees. High-quality project objectives will be relevant to the project and to the overall PDP goals, the goals of your project and our program. They will be applicable to the project objectives. There should be a clear relationship between the specific activities that you plan to conduct and accomplishing the project's objectives. We will look to see how focused is the project objective, and then be sure that the concepts mentioned are measurable. They lend themselves to measurement, and that measurement is feasible, something that you can carry out. Look at a couple of examples. So here are several examples of what may be an appropriate project objective. These three show different levels of specificity around the general idea of recruiting and retaining high-quality scholars. The number of project objectives that you will have varies. The number you have may be different than the number another grantee has, and that is fine. In general, I would say fewer are better. I encourage you to work with your project officer if you have any questions about the number of objectives or writing objectives. But in general, stick with objectives that are closely aligned to the program goals that we mentioned earlier, and then some additional ones that are specific to your project. We are not looking for objectives to deal with project infrastructure or with activities, but with the broader goals of what you're trying to accomplish as an outcome for your grant. Performance measures talk about how you will be measuring your progress in meeting your objectives. We're going to focus a little more attention now on performance measures. As I mentioned, performance measures are measurable indicators used to determine how well objectives are being met. They should include how progress will be assessed, how much progress you expect in order to call it a success, what you plan to measure, who will be making progress, and within what time frame. So a strong performance measure will indicate how much, what, who, and when. This slide is intended to show how project objectives fit with multiple performance measures. Typically, you would have an objective, and under it, several performance measures. And here's the different type of performance measures we're looking for. OSEP recognizes 3 types of performance measures. The first is called GEPRA, measures that were established by OSEP. They were approved by the Office of Management and Budget for our use in reporting to Congress. As a result of the Government Performance and Results Act in 1993, every government program is required to have outcome measures, performance measures, that can be used to assess the quality of the work under that federal funding. So I should say they each have to have performance measures. Measures that have been developed and approved by OMB are called GEPRA, short for Government Performance and Results Act measures. Program measures are measures that are established by OSEP and are required for every grant funded under a particular program. They would be in addition to GEPRA measures. Sometimes there might be an additional requirement that a program is asking. But OSEP we use our GEPRA measures as our program measures. So those measures that were approved by OMB are the measures we use to evaluate performance for the Personnel Development Program, and we report to the Secretary and to Congress annually, and they use the data and an evaluation that comes from it to decide about continuation funding. So similar to the process that you all are involved with annual performance reporting. So when you complete the form, the standard ed form, you're going to see 3 types of performance measures, and we're calling our GEPRA measures program measures. So please use program measures, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. And then finally, there's project performance measures. Project performance measures are unique to you, to each grantee. So you as a grantee may go beyond the measures that we've developed in evaluating your performance. We will be reporting for the 325K program, and we ask you to be aware of those program measures and develop project measures that are aligned. And I'll give you a little more information as we go forward. So first, let's start with the Personnel Development Program performance measures. There are 5 measures that we are currently using to evaluate our performance. Each year, we ask each grantee to include these measures in their annual performance report using the wording exactly as it is specified here. So you'll see the first one is the percentage of preparation programs that incorporate scientifically or evidence-based practice. We are interested in the percentage of scholars completing preparation programs who are knowledgeable and skilled in evidence-based practices and know how to use them in serving children with disabilities. We are looking at the percentage of scholars who exit preparation programs prior to completion due to poor academic performance. The percentage of scholars completing preparation programs who are working in the areas for which they were prepared. So we want people to graduate and then work in the field. And finally, the federal cost per scholar who completed the preparation program. Those are the currently approved personnel development program performance measures, the program performance measures. For grants funded in 2017, they'll see this wording in their application. You might have been funded earlier and see slightly different wording. We were able to clarify some of the wording and simplify some of the wording. So we encourage you to use the new wording. It should be consistent, conceptually consistent with what you've been using in the past. But this is the current wording that we have approval to use. You might have seen additional measures or slightly different measures. You see in the box at the bottom of the page that we have discontinued reporting on several program performance measures. So if that's something you've reported on in the past, you're no longer required to do so. You're free to do it if you like. You're not required to do it. For grants funded in 2014 and after, we have some additional program performance measures that we are piloting. These measures, again, were approved by OMB, and OSEP is responsible for collecting information on these 3 new measures. You'll see that they're structured to be outcome measures, and they're looking at what happens to scholars post-graduation. So first, we are piloting the percentage of scholars who complete the preparation program and that are employed in high-need districts. We provide a definition of high-need districts in the priority, and we have one that we use for our purposes. You're free to define high-need districts as you like. Just share with us your definition. The second is the percentage of scholars who complete the preparation program and are employed in the field of special education for at least 2 years. Please notice that special education is small. Small letter S and P, so we're talking about the field broadly. If you were, it's personnel who are serving children who are IDEA eligible. So it may be a school psychologist or a speech pathologist. We fund special education teachers, early intervention, early childhood, workforce personnel, and related services personnel. And we're interested in knowing if once they've graduated, they go on to be employed in the field for at least 2 years. And then finally, the percentage of scholars who completed the preparation program and are rated as effective by their employers. So we now are working with graduates and collect that information to see if their employers give them a rating of effective. When I say the measures are pilot program performance measures, we are collecting we're piloting them, collecting data for several years. In 2018, we'll make a decision about continuing or perhaps modifications needed, and then those measures are likely to become GEPR measures, program performance measures, like I talked about on the page before. All right, so program performance measures, they're relevant to you as well. Many of them are worded because we're looking at the aggregate and reporting to Congress, but we ask that grantees propose a project performance measure that addresses each of our program performance measures. The focus of the project measure should be the same. It should be clearly aligned with the program performance measures. I'll talk with you. I'm going to give you some examples and talk about how you would do that on the APR. But in general, each program performance measure needs to appear in Section A on the status sheet, and right immediately following is an aligned project performance measure. And then in addition, you may have other project performance measures that are unique just to your grant, and that is fine to have some additional ones. As we talk through these examples, I think it will become clear what we're looking for. So the first program performance measure the percent of preparation programs that incorporate scientifically or evidence-based practices into the curriculum. You should have that written verbatim on the APR as one of the performance measures, and immediately below something similar that's at the project level. So here's an example. By the end of year 1, all core program course syllabi will achieve a score of 90 or higher on its integration of evidence-based practices as measured by an expert panel using a rubric designed by the project. If you remember, we talked about high-quality performance measures specifying who, when, how much, and all of those features should be in this example. But you could word it slightly differently. So this one is clearly aligned with the one above. There's more than one way that you can outline your project performance measure. Here's another example for number 2, a program performance measure number 2, the percent of scholars completing the preparation program who are knowledgeable and skilled in the use of evidence-based practices for children with disabilities. A related project measure might be, by the end of year 5, 95% of scholars will demonstrate knowledge and skills in all assessment competencies at an acceptable level or higher using a rubric designed by the project. What's important is that you specify how you plan to measure an outcome such as this. Some people will use comprehensive exams, maybe a portfolio that's already required for the completion of internship. This project has proposed to use an assessment of competencies. So there's more than one way to construct a project performance measure, but it needs to be clearly aligned so a reader can see the connection. Here's one that aligns very closely. Number 3, the percent of scholars who exit the preparation program prior to completion due to poor academic performance. The related project measure is as measured annually. No scholars will have exited the program due to poor academic or field-based performances. So the wording is very similar, and you can begin to see the connection. Number 4, again, an example of we have the program performance measure, and then below an example of a related project performance measure. And we've provided an example for each of the required program performance measures. And then you'll see we also have some examples. I move forward, you'll see that we have examples of pilot program performance measures. Here's at the top in green, you can see the wording that we use for the program measure, and below an example of a related project performance measure. Some of these you might see in parentheses. You may have noticed this one says outcome measure. One of the early ones said process measure. So we'll talk a little bit about those differences in a minute. The percent of scholars who completed the preparation program and are employed in the field of special education for at least 2 years. A related project measure could be in response to the project's annual survey of graduates, the percentage of respondents who report being employed as a school psychologist on a survey developed by the project for 2 consecutive years. I'm going to show you number 3. And here you'll notice that the related measure is, this one is not, but you will sometimes, this is the percentage of employers who rate the university's graduates as well prepared or better. So they didn't use the word effective. They used the words well prepared. That's how they have decided to personalize it for use with their grant. The other thing I wanted to mention is these measures demonstrate collecting data with program graduates. If you feel that is burdensome, sometimes a proxy related measure might be asking the supervisors for internship or a field placement that is a culminating experience toward the end of your program of study to evaluate the performance of soon-to-be program graduates. So perhaps it would say the percentage of supervisors who rate university interns as well prepared in response to a competency-based survey that is administered at the end of internship, just an example. You'll find available in the resources that we provide some additional measures. We have a document that includes all of the program performance measures and several examples of related project measures for each one. And I'll give you a little more information about where to find that as we finish today. All right, so let's talk. We've talked about how GEPRA and program performance measures are the same, and we've chosen to use the language program performance measures. So when you see the choices, please pick program, not GEPRA. And then finally, let's talk a little bit about project performance measures. So these are the measures that each grantee reports, develops, and then reports on for their own unique grant. You can have, let me start over. You can establish performance measures that you will use to address grant objectives and program goals. You may have several that are related. If we look back at some of the program performance measures and the related project measures, you might have an additional intermediary performance measure. Instead of waiting until the end of internship or until 2 years after graduation, maybe you would add a project performance measure that asks for an evaluation of scholar performance at the end of year 2 or at the end of each semester. So think carefully about what you would like your project performance measures to be. You can have a mix of process measures and outcome measures. And again, for each of them, we want to be sure that they show what will change, how much change to expect, who will achieve the change, when, and how will the change be measured. I'm not going to read through all of these, but we, here in this webinar, and then I said on the other document that will be posted with this webinar, some examples of project measures that grantees have developed that and have used to evaluate their own performance toward meeting objectives. You can see in parentheses who, how much, what, and when. We also see that there's a combination of outcome and process measures. And then there's a second page with some additional examples. These are all outcome measures, so they're looking for the performance at the end of the program, following practicum, as opposed to process measures that are talking about progress along the way. Some of the difficulty that grantees have in writing high-quality performance measures is they use activities. Activities are not the same as performance measures. So we don't want to know that you've finished we don't want to know that you spent 2 hours a day reading the book. We want to know that your reading skills have changed. So if the best response, if you ask yourself, did we do that? And the answer is yes, you're probably thinking about an activity and not a performance measure. Some examples might be some examples of activities that we see often. We're going to hold an advisory board meeting quarterly. All faculty will attend professional development by the end of year 1. Scholars will complete required coursework. Those, if I said, did the scholars complete the required coursework, and the answer would be yes, then you know that's an activity. And it would be helpful to word the question a little bit to make it a performance measures. The other common problem is that performance measures are not measurable. The terms need to be concrete, often observable, and clearly measurable. So here's some examples of measurement problems. When you're a statement saying that you will see evidence of meaningful collaborative partnerships. What does that look like? How will I know? provide mentors to socialize scholars to the program. Is that an activity? Or providing support, is that an activity? But even if it is not an activity, it's difficult to measure. We want to be sure that we have a valid, reliable way of measuring performance in order to have strong performance measures. All right, so in summary, we have talked about how projects should have a few clear objectives that explain what their project is doing to support the overall goals for your grant and for the OSEP Personnel Development Program. Each objective should have a few specific performance measures to demonstrate how progress toward meeting the objective is being measured. You will have perhaps a program performance measure that aligns with the objective. You may have, you would, if following the program performance measure, also have a project performance measure closely aligned, and then you may have some additional ones that are unique to your project called project performance measures. All right, there's tons of resources available to help support you through this development of your annual performance report. Once you develop it in year 1, year 2, and year 3, you'll have a good model for a template, maybe for getting started, and then you'll perhaps be updating and revising as opposed to beginning. It won't be an entirely new, unfamiliar process each year. Resources are available at the OSEP ideasthatwork.org website. You will find there information on developing performance measures and a logic model. So if you'd like some additional information to short a webinar there that was developed a number of years ago and has been really helpful. It talks about logic model in the title, but it actually addresses performance measures and logic models. And then finally, you will also find a page, a folder for Personnel Development Program, and then a folder with resources around the APR. So in that folder, you will find this webinar has been archived and some of the documents that I mentioned as we were talking. There is a 325K APR cover sheet and executive summary. There's another document, the APR status sheet. It's an example with some of the type of answers, some prompts written in, some tips to help you complete that form. I think those are very good, very helpful templates for completing the APR. The cover sheet and executive summary is in one folder, one document, and the other is status sheets, which includes the quantitative performance measures. It talks about the budget information, and then section 3 is other information. You will find the document with examples of project measures aligned to the program performance measures that I've mentioned. For each program performance measure, there are several examples of high-quality project measures. You're welcome to use some wording. If that is meaningful to you, you're welcome to use measures like that. You also can take them and adapt them. So we're not asking you to use those particular measures. We're just giving them as examples to help you craft your own. And then finally, there is a list of the program performance measures for PDP. It's just a one-page document that shows the information you saw earlier on the 5 measures and the 3 pilot program measures. This webinar will be archived for your use if you'd like to review it again. And there's a companion webinar I'd like you to know about. It's short, about 15 minutes, and it specifically addresses completing the 524B. So it's about how to complete that form. It's a little confusing at first because it is used by all programs and all offices within the department, so it has to serve many needs. This webinar will walk you through the completion of that form, and we'll make it a little more understandable, the process. And finally, your project officer is always available and happy to answer questions. I often ask my grantees to submit a draft. Well, we'll perhaps schedule a call, talk through their ideas, share with me their thoughts of a project measure that aligns to the program performance measures, to help provide feedback on those measures, some clarifying questions, completing the forms. Project officers are very happy to talk with you about any of the content we covered today. Review a draft of your performance report before you actually submit it into G5, and in generally helping you with your work. So feel free to reach out to your project officer to schedule a call or exchange information by email. I'd like to thank you for taking time to listen to the webinar today. I hope that we've provided some information that's helpful for you in understanding the requirements for performance measures related to 325K, and we'll be making the process of submitting your annual performance report a little bit easier and certainly successful. Thank you so much.